Hey everybody, Eric Schweitzer here, joined today by the Gamer's editor-in-chief, Stacy Henley. Hello, Stacy.
Hello.
You're looking at the first gameplay footage for the Spiritborn, the new class coming to Diablo 4 in the Vessel of Hatred expansion. I think I got all of those words right. Stacy, you played Diablo 4 some, right?
Yeah, I kind of dabbled in the series prior to 4. I played a little bit of 2, a little bit of 3, but I'd never really gotten into it. It was actually your review, and not just review, but conversations that we'd had before it, where you mentioned the kind of extra emphasis on the narrative part of Diablo that had kind of been lacking a little bit before, or hadn't been as present. So I played through the base game, um, and then dabbled with a couple of other classes as well, in the same way that I have with previous Diablos. But this is the most I've ever gotten into it. But
Hmm.
I haven't kept up with any post-launch content because I just never got into it to play it as a live service seasonal game. I know that's a
Right.
big draw for the community, but for me, I have kind of I played through the story, and that was what I wanted to get out of the experience.
Yeah. I think you make a good point that the strength of the narrative is definitely one of my favorite parts, surprisingly, about Diablo 4, because I am a number go up seasonal
Yep.
grinder kind of player. Though I haven't been very invested in the Diablo 4 seasons. I played through it twice for review because they wiped
Yes, I
my
remember that.
game after my first run, so I max leveled two characters, and then there were some things that needed to be addressed before the seasons came out, and so I kind of fell off until they polished up some things. So I haven't touched the seasons, but I am impressed that they've got a full DLC coming so soon, only a year-ish after launch. And it is a full DLC. It's not just the character. There's a entirely second map, another like big open world map. I couldn't tell if it was the same size because there was only one like zone unlocked for me when I was
Yeah.
playing. And we didn't get into narrative at all, other than what you could assume from the end of Diablo 4. Narelle has Mephisto Soulstone. She's gone back to Nahantu, which is a place from Diablo 2, the city of Kurast in this big jungle zone. And so we're going back there. Um, the new class is called the Spiritborn, and it's tied to this zone. And when they revealed the Spiritborn, they just showed a piece of key art and the name, and that was it. And so this preview that we did and this live stream that they did today was the big reveal for the character. But before I get into it, let me ask you: when I say Spiritborn, what do you get from that?
That's just what I was going to ask, actually, because they've teased some other interesting classes before. I know no one likes the mobile game, but that had a pretty cool
Yeah.
class, like a blood assassin, a while ago. Obviously, they've dropped some of the classic ones in Diablo, like bards and stuff. Spiritborn to me feels like maybe a little bit. We obviously already have necromancy in the game, but I see something kind of ghostly,
Mm-hmm.
maybe elemental,
Mm-hmm.
some kind of mage that uses power of nature, fireballs, water bending, that sort of thing is what I get from Spiritborn. Maybe it's a bit more towards the nature side with like eco powers.
Mm. None of that.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh,
They have a
so
machine gun.
I think yeah. So I don't think it is a name that describes what it is very well. The key art that we saw was a person with tribal tattoos
Mhm.
wearing an animal headdress, carrying a spear. Um, I think that evokes maybe some more specific ideas of what kind of character this is. But it wasn't. It turned out to be something that I didn't expect at all, and I wonder if they're going to have a little bit of trouble getting across what this character is without a big long explanation, which I'm about to dive into because it is a pretty complex idea. But yeah, I just wanted to say that first is like it's not it's not an assassin or a druid. You know, it is
Yeah,
a
those names
totally
kind of are very evocative. Druid maybe more so because it's famous across like 50 years of being used in tabletop.
yeah,
But if somebody's a barbarian, yeah, I know what they do. They break
right,
things. Like
right.
it calls something to mind quite easily. I know that in this game, things like a hunter is always a very obvious class of what they're going to do.
Yeah. So I actually have some respect for the choices that they made with this character. First of all, so Diablo 4 had 5 classes and they were all classic
Yeah,
Diablo classes, no new ones, new twists and new approaches to them, but they were like classic characters. But what they didn't have was a sword and shield paladin crusader type
right.
character, and there was a lot of desire for one, and a lot of expectation that the next character they added would be that type because there's just no version of that play style in the game. And instead, they've decided to create a totally new class. Never had a class in Diablo really like this. It is kind of an amalgamation class, but they said when I was there. By the way, I didn't say this, but I visited the Blizzard campus to play this, and we can talk a little bit about that too because it's a pretty cool place. What they told me was that they wanted to make a new class that was tied to the story that they were telling in Vessel of Hatred. That it was important to make something that to make a type of character that felt like they belonged in this environment and could be part of the story, which is um, a little bit surprising for Diablo. But it goes back to what we were saying about the base game and how narrative was a much bigger part of it than past games.
Yeah, I
So
think that's
I
going to give them a bit more of a challenge, right? Like the fact that they have designed a narrative that kind of embraces all of these characters. It's much harder, I think, to add in a new character
right,
to that because they need to. I know you say they go to a new map, but to a certain extent, they need to fit into the world. If someone was to buy Diablo today, or not today, whenever this new class is out in a month or so, can you play through the main base game with Spiritborn, or is it kind of exclusive for the
so
expansion?
I asked that, and I didn't get a straight answer,
Right. Okay.
because the narrative conceit behind this character, the Spiritborn and their people, is that they live in the jungles and they stay out of the fight. But now that Narel has brought the Soul Stone
The fight
to
has come to
their
them.
land, yes, the fight has come to them. So I asked, does that mean that you don't have to play? Because traditionally with these DLCs, when they introduce a new character, you start at the beginning and you play all the way to the end.
Yeah.
It's an act structure, like it goes in order. Um, and they said, I think, like it was like a group interview with a few developers, and they all looked at each other when I asked, and one of them was like, I think you can just start at the DLC area, but you start at level 1.
Right.
So, yeah, I think you're right, but they weren't totally positive.
Okay.
Okay, so what is the Spiritborn? It is a martial arts class. So some similarities to the monk. I
Yeah, that's
think
what I was
they
thinking.
use pole arms, two
Mm-hmm.
handed sticks, a stick with a blade on one end, or a stick with a blade on both ends. Are there are there 3 weapon classes? And they are a tribal people. They that live in Nahantu jungles, and they are connected to the spirit realm, which is a new concept for Diablo. It's they what did they say? They said the high heavens are for the angels, and the burning hells are for the demons, and the spirit realm are for the humans. So it is sort of an afterlife thing, but it's more about like gods and belief and the
Yeah.
power you can draw from faith, I think. And it's all tied to animal gods. Um, and what makes the class unique is that all of the abilities on the skill tree are labeled with a different spirit god.
Okay.
And so there are four. Uh, there is the jaguar, the eagle, the gorilla, and the centipede. And each of those four spirits represent a particular type of play style or ability, a particular fighting style. You can almost think of it like a stance, like a martial arts
Yeah.
stance. And they're not, the abilities aren't just one thing. Sometimes it can be both a jaguar and an eagle
Sure.
skill. And you can build your character to be all jaguar or mix and match these abilities however you like. And a unique mechanic that they have is called the Spirit Hall, and the Spirit Hall is basically, it's just the two passive abilities that are connected to one of these four spirits. And the first one you choose, either jaguar, eagle, gorilla, or centipede, will give a bonus to those types of abilities. It'll do whatever to all jaguar skills, and also it will make every skill you have equipped a jaguar skill on top of whatever it is.
Right. I mean, I didn't
This,
I didn't guess anything like this when you asked
yeah,
me to guess it, but as you describe it, it does kind of feel the kind of spirituality that you see in some like what was it, Zao Tales of Kanzara,
yeah,
like channeling different gods and leaning on the kind of folk tales of ancestry. So I can
right.
see why it's a hard sell for them, but I can also see why they said we have this character who has different spirit animals and he's a Spiritborn, and they all went, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, let's
Mm.
go to lunch.
Yeah, I kept thinking about Black Panther
Yeah,
a lot, because their religion and culture is very much tied to like animal deities like Bast. Aesthetically, it does feel kind of an amalgamation of like Mesoamerican natives and African. Um, I asked the first question I asked was about the cultural influence in the aesthetic and just like who the Spiritborn are. And I also didn't really get an answer to that.
yeah, it
I
doesn't
was told.
surprise me.
I was told, oh, they come from a lot of different places. Oh, we were inspired by many things. Um, I think it's a little bit dangerous ground when you consider Diablo's history with things like the Witch Doctor. This could get a little yikesy. I think somebody else asked about like sensitivity oversight and if how what they did to ensure that they weren't being insensitive, and they said, yeah, we worked really hard on that, blah blah blah.
Yeah, it's probably something we could go off on a tangent on for a long time, probably on a different show. But
Yeah,
I feel like there's this corporatization of these ancestors sometimes. Like there's there's not really much point sometimes in showing the press these things because the press ask, oh, you've got this character influenced by African culture. Do you want to like tell us some of your influences? Do you want to like show off and draw on your inspiration, your creativity, and go personal with it? Tell us about like a book that you read or some story that you're
right,
inspired
that's
by,
what
or
I'm
some
looking
like
for.
shout out some like African artist or Native American artist or whatever the inspiration is. Like, tell us where this comes from. Because even like Ghost of Tsushima, we did it a little kind of hackneyed, but at least they kind of went, yeah, Kurosawa. We like Kurosawa.
Yeah,
We're white guys. We like Kurosawa. We made a samurai game, Kurosawa mode, and they got a bit of stick for it, and probably rightly so, because it was a bit of a sledgehammer to subtlety. But I feel like saying we were inspired by a lot of people is you were inspired by nothing. That's not an answer.
yeah, right,
Everyone's inspired by everything.
yeah.
Like I find that answer to be really disappointing to the point where I don't really believe them. I feel like you weren't inspired by a lot of things. I feel like you Googled some stuff and just kind of drew them.
Yeah, and I guess if I'm being charitable, the fear is that if they identify a specific thing, then people will run too far with it, or people from that background will be overly critical. And the truth is, like, they are combining different aspects of different cultures, but they just don't want to
That
identify what those
that's
are.
true. If they said it was African, then people will say, well, yeah, you know, it's you're taking opportunities away from African devs and how many African people do you have on the team and stuff like that. And I mean, we
Yeah,
saw it with Spider-Man as well when there was like the guy who created Venom Wings didn't get paid for this game. Like, no, of
right,
course he didn't. He didn't work
right.
on the game.
Yeah,
Like, he had no input in how the game works.
yeah.
I think it can be messy, and I get that. I suppose I still think it's quite cowardly to be influenced by real culture
Hmm.
and then to kind of refuse to elaborate on that while saying, "Oh,
Yeah.
but you can be a really cool eagle god." Anyway, tell me about this class because I do want to hear about it. I just
For spirits, okay, so Jaguar is the multi-hit combo fighting style. It
okay,
is imbued with fire, and it is the like really fast flurry of hits. They have cool like strings of moves where they're flipping around, hitting this guy, bouncing left and right. It felt a little bit novel for Diablo to have combos.
yeah,
Not in a sense of like these two abilities work well together, but in like I'm doing a string of
yeah, like a
attacks.
Batman Arkham style thing,
Yeah, a little bit like that. Yeah. That's Jaguar. And then Gorilla is the punch my way forward and don't stop. They have a lot of defense buff building into their attacks where like one of their core abilities is retribution. It's where they get hit and they hit back harder. And I think
right?
that's sort of like the philosophy of the whole play style. Then you have Eagle, which they call their glass cannon style. It is the agility one, so they move around a lot. They don't want to get hit, so they're dodging, and a lot of their attacks have really long range. So they're either using their spear to extend it and stab further, or they're using these like it's the electricity one, so they're using
Right.
these like electrified feathers and throwing them out. And then finally, the centipede. The centipede is the poison
Okay.
class subclass, and it's like it represents the cycle of life and death. So it's poisoning, but also like life steal.
That
Uh,
should definitely have been Snake. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what a snake is.
They talked about that, and it was deliberate to avoid an obvious
Okay,
uh,
sure.
icon
I'm gonna stop having a go at the
and
creative
do centipede
ideas.
instead.
Centipede
Uh,
is more interesting. It is.
Yeah, they wanted. Yeah, they wanted to do something more interesting with it. And what's cool that I'm sure people have seen at this point that we've been talking for 20 minutes, but the abilities are infused with these animals. So when you use a gorilla skill to do a big punch, you get this like gorilla arm that comes
Okay,
out.
yeah, I like that.
And with the centipede, when you activate your poison trail, you see the spirit centipede behind you drawing in the poison, and all of those things sort of build up to each of their ultimate ability where you actually summon the spirit itself. And the jaguar will leap in and do a big spin attack and light everything on fire, or the gorilla jumps in and does the Donkey Kong ground pound and hits guys over and over. The eagle one is a very quick. It'll land and do damage and then take off and do damage, but you can use it multiple times, so
Okay,
it fits into the I'm jumping over here, I'm jumping over
the
there.
speed element.
The
Yeah.
eagles coming in and out, and then the centipede bursts out of the ground and is this just giant centipede and starts spitting acid all around. So flavor wise, thematically, it's working together really well. Of course, they're when you talk to them, they're emphasizing like you choose your play style and the one that
Yeah.
the spirit that most resonates with you. And of course, that's not how you play Diablo. You pick the strongest build.
Sure.
You know, like, oh, this Jaguar skill's good, the Centipede one's good together. I think I played a couple hours and it seemed like the Eagles mobility stuff mixed with the Centipede's AoE room clearing
Yeah.
poison, you would probably put those together because you're going to move fast and you're going to kill everything around you fast. It might not, maybe you like the big gorilla punches, but the way people play Diablo is what clears a room the fastest.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I'm running the same dungeon 5,000 times. I don't really
Yeah.
care which one's coolest, right? Um, but I also got a little bit of taste of how the gear feeds into um, the abilities, and it's the same stuff you would expect from the base game, where you'll get something that enhances a skill, and now you're changing your build around that piece of gear you got. But in this case, it's like a piece of gear that affects all eagle skills. So now
Right.
you're going back into your skill tree and you're reconsidering, oh, what kind of new synergies do I have because I got this helmet that buffs eagle skills in this interesting way. I
I
had
suppose
one.
that's a bit different. Like, I know you do rebuild a lot in Diablo, but I suppose that kind of the four different directions you can move yourself in is a little bit different.
Yeah,
Certainly, when I've played, I haven't kind of gotten gear and gone, okay, I'm now not going to be this type of barbarian. I'm going to be that type of barbarian. I just mainly stuck with the attacks that have cleared the room fastest.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it is a more layered build crafting, I think, for
Yeah.
at first blush from what we've seen before. They set us up with a couple of things like pre-made characters, and you could see how things work together. For instance, I had a piece of gear that there's an eagle ability where you just throw out feathers in a ring around you,
Right.
and I had a piece of gear that would make those feathers then come back, so they would hit things twice. And so I could combine that with a gorilla skill that reflected projectiles. So I'd throw the feathers out, they'd come back, I'd activate this block,
Yeah.
they'd bounce off me, go out again, come back again. So it's like, oh, okay, all right, I see that things are building on each other in kind of a cool way.
Yeah, I like that a lot. The
Um,
synergy between skills is a big part of Diablo, I think. Whether
yes,
accidental as they sometimes are, or not accidental, but players find ways to do it. It's nice to see the devs leaning into that way of play, I guess, and tailoring a build to that experimentation.
yes, yeah. And I think that a lot of them just lend themselves to cross class synergy naturally. There's a one of the primary eagle skills is just a pull, and if you can just pull mobs into you, then you can do
And, yeah, anything.
anything, right? Like then you can combo that with a jaguar skill or a gorilla skill or something. Like, so yeah, you're not necessarily encouraged to build jaguar.
Yeah.
um, Another thing I like from an art perspective is that they talked a lot about their armor, the way they wear their clothes, and it is not to build material defense the way some other characters might. They're not
Okay.
wearing armor per se. What they're wearing is effigy to their spirits, so they dress to reflect whatever their patron spirits are. So the gear that you get that relates to Jaguar, that enhances Jaguar abilities, will be Jaguar themed.
Yeah. That's very
Uh,
monk as
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, but it's cool that you know in Diablo you just put on whatever the best gear is, and
Yeah.
there's like transmog and stuff, but you're just wearing whatever the best gear is. But I think it's kind of cool that in this case you are putting on the best gear, and because the gear influences the abilities that you choose, there is this continuity between, well, I'm wearing the jaguar helmet that enhances my jaguar abilities, so I'm using jaguar abilities, and
Yeah.
now I sort of look like the character I'm playing as. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, there's that kind of growth of character development that you get in a lot of, I guess, single player RPGs because you get
Mm.
better gear as you go on, and they tend to be a bit more I don't know, narratively linked. You get certain helmets or swords or whatever it is for doing
Yeah.
certain quests, and they're linked to kind of past successes. But because Diablo, it's you clear a dungeon 5,000 times, a lot of the gear is just kind of what are the numbers? I need the
Yep.
numbers.
Yeah.
So it is nice to have that. I'm
Yeah.
being sold on this all the time. The more you talk about this, I feel like if I was going to do another run of Diablo, which I'm honestly not sure that I am, having seen the main story, but the DLC thing tempts me. Um, this one is appealing to me.
Cool. Yeah, I was pretty impressed by it. I think that they designed it with a strong sense of how people play Diablo.
Hmm.
Um, I think sometimes maybe Blizzard especially can fall into a trap of this is how we want people to play the game rather than sort of reflecting on how people want to play the game. And I think like it felt like a lot of the skill tree, a lot of the abilities that I was experimenting with were designed for like fast clears, big AoE, um, less like single target flashy long animations and more just like quick and to the point and move quickly stuff. um
Which is interesting because I think we've both praised for its narrative, but I think
mhm.
generally the fan base was a little bit. This is what you want Diablo to be, embracing a bigger story, the type of
Mhm.
map that it used, a little bit more towards trying to ensnare new fans, not as much attention maybe paid to some of the classic Diablo tropes. Felt like that was maybe a thing. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Games take a long time to make. Maybe this was in the path
Yeah.
pipeline long before this ever happened, but I feel like that might be a reflection of Diablo's initial reception being, we're not sure this is for us.
Mm. They did say that this was 2 years in development. They did start
So,
before it launched. Um, but yeah, I'm sure at some point that initial feedback to the game started to bleed into the process for this. At least it does feel that way. Yeah. So like I said, I didn't get to experience anything about the story. I saw a section of the map. I saw Kurast, which was really cool because that's a Diablo 2 city and they've recreated it here, and it's just a very small town in a giant map. So it's cool to have like a familiar place recontextualized like that. It has all the same dungeons and landmarks and activities, and I didn't. There likely is new types of content, but the
okay.
map I saw was full of all the things that we've been doing in Diablo for the last year, which is fine, I think. Um, and Yeah, I'm definitely interested in playing more of the class, and seeing. I guess more than anything, seeing the new gear and how and what kind of impact that has. Because they gave me fully fleshed out characters. I got to use every single skill, and not to say I've already mastered the class in 2 hours, but I've seen all the abilities and I've seen how they work together and stuff. But what I haven't seen is how the gear and the builds influence that. So that's what I'm looking forward to seeing next. But interesting choice.
Yeah, I think I know it's not Monk. I know it's something different from Monk, but I do think Monk is a nice direction for it to go in. Um, I know I had a couple of gripes about exactly how they build it, but the
Mm.
way you've described it seems pretty cool. And like I say, if I was going to go back to Diablo, which it's kind of a maybe, it's not a no. This is the kind of class that would pull me, I think, back in.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I almost wish they would launch with two classes just because it is very cool and everyone's going to want to play it, and the whole game's just going to be full of Spiritborn.
Yeah.
So,
By the
but
time I
but
arrive, people will have moved on from it, and I'll be the only one again.
yeah, but part of these different stances, at least the way they described it, was that if your party has a particular need, Diablo doesn't have a tank healer DPS
Hmm.
holy trinity, but they feel at least that if your party is missing a particular defensive slash offensive slash supportive role, that you can use these different spirit types to sort of spec into.
Spiritborn is all three in one in a way that
That's the way
a
they see
barbarian
it.
is not.
Yeah. So we'll see if that is true. But this is coming out soon, surprisingly soon. Okay, cool. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell, and visit us at thegamer.com. That's the gamer, no spaces.